right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I think we are around episode 179 or something of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. That is the name of our program. And I am Billy Bob on the West Coast. I hope to retire soon in about 5 years, if possible. And I've got my co-host, Ian Kummer, who is streaming live from a suburb in Moscow. He recently has gotten his immigration paperwork, red tape, for lack of a better word.
Yes,
residency. Yeah, so residency as a resident of the Russian Federation, and he is streaming live again from Moscow. So, we've been doing this for a while. This is episode almost 180. But we haven't streamed for a couple weeks, I believe, and there's been a lot going on. So today we wanted to talk about Venezuela primarily, and obviously there's some activity in Venezuela. We're still not quite sure about what it all means and what is actually going on, but we do know some things objectively have happened. But Ian, I want to throw it to you, and I want you to just kind of plug the variety of journalistic pursuits that you have. I know you've got a Substack, you've got your own blog, but try and just really quickly summarize all the places that people can view your work.
Yes, so as Billy Bob mentioned, I got most of my personal Russian drama taken care of. I got my immigration status all taken care of. We bought a house in Crimea, which we're planning to visit again probably in a month or so. So this year, my New Year's resolution was to really focus on my writing, my journalism, because unfortunately, this past year I kind of neglected it a little bit because there's so much going on. But I am back, and we're updating the website and the Substack regularly now. So you can visit the blog at Reading Junkie, which has my opinions and analysis. And then we have a new Substack, which, well, it's not exactly new. I started it about 6 months ago, but I wasn't updating it as much as I should have. But the Substack is dedicated to Russian media, and what that means is Russian language media. And what I do is I go through the Russian news, the actual Russian language news, because I came to realize, I'm sure this is true for every country's media, what they say in English and what's said in their own language are often very different, and they're often even completely different authors. So I realized it was useful to have these media summaries where I just link to a bunch of Russian news of what's going on right now, and to give my English reading audience an idea of what Russians are thinking and saying in the media. And I actually kind of wish more people did that. And not even just for Russia. Like, I'd be interested to see something from Poland or Japan, where there's just a summary, because a lot of people give their opinion. I think this, or I read in the media that they said this. There's a million pages like that, but there's really no neutral, just media summary of this is what is going on today. So in this one, I really focus. I talked about other things, but my main topic was the Russian reaction to Trump's attack on Caracas. I'm sure I'm butchering Caracas in Venezuela, and there was quite a bit of disappointment, and and people debating about it, because it was a very fast, under an hour. People are comparing it to people are comparing it to Russian airborne operations in Ukraine. It's like, well, what if they kidnapped? So, people are even saying, what if the Russians just kidnapped Zelensky or killed Zelensky right at the beginning, February 2022, and I think the main consensus is that there's really, and that's why I actually titled this article, that's why Ukraine and Venezuela cannot be compared. And the reason why is it is apples and oranges. And there's a very good quote I found from a Russian engineer. I guess he's some sort of professional who spent a lot of time in Latin America, including Venezuela. His name is, I don't think he's anyone in particular, but his name is Sergei Hitovkach. And he made a statement basically, and I'm just going to read it verbatim because it's very, it's good, it's pretty succinct, and it makes more sense to just read it rather than try to paraphrase it. So he said, it's a big mistake to measure Latin Americans by our standards. By our, he means Russian standards, by Russian standards. Latin Americans don't have a great past to rely on. We have been burned down many times, lost battles and wars, but we've always recovered and take our own back. We have a history of our ancestors, and we have an idea, however small it may be. We've been great a few times, and we want to be great again. Our history is a sine wave, and we know it. Latin Americans have always been under someone's thumb. Kings and Cabbages is a must-read, and nothing has changed. They don't care if the next president is a U.S. puppet. They don't have the same sense of national pride and geopolitical adversaries that we do. Castro offered a project that would make people's lives better. And yet under Castro, they were better off compared to the extreme poverty that Cubans were in during the Batista era. The most ridiculous manipulation is to compare the standard of living in Cuba with the modern United States, and not with what it was before Castro. And so, Maduro not only didn't have much to offer, he didn't realize much in 15 years. Therefore, it was handed over by their own people. And when he says that, that's probably the most, I just need to interject some clarification there. That's the most popular opinion among Russian social media and news commentary, that there was inside help. And I think actually since this was written, there has even been some admission that the CIA and the Department of War got some inside help. And that's why the mission was so successful. But anyways, therefore, it's handed over by their own people. Therefore, there will be no squabbling for power, except for those who are not yet aware. Therefore, there will be no partisans there, as there were in the Bay of Pigs. Everything has already been decided there, as evidenced by the quote-unquote fierce resistance. And it was simply necessary to remove the nominal figure and blame all the sins on him. The Tsar is bad, and the boyars are the same. So that's the commentary. That's the the Venezuelans, the Venezuelan bureaucracy and people in power, didn't want a full-scale war with the USA because they realized they would lose it. And so they said, so there's this idea that they just handed over Maduro on the hopes that Trump wouldn't escalate further than that. He would invade Venezuela. And he might even lift sanctions, bring back some of the other oil companies besides Chevron. So that's a very popular theory. I think that actually lines up well with just the total failure of their defenses, because it's very. But I think I want to focus first on the Bay of Pigs aspects. You mentioned the Bay of Pigs, and I think Cuba is a great analogy because Castro did do something that Maduro didn't. Castro took power in Cuba, and he actually really made it a better place. Like it was just without, people manipulate by comparing it to, Americans are so much better. Well, America is like one of the most powerful countries in the world. Of course, we have more stuff than Cubans do, which is an island. It's ridiculous comparison, but they don't compare it to Batista because, of course, Castro's Cuba is so much better than it was under Batista. It was a dictator, and it was just everybody except this handful of oligarchs were in power, and it was so much better after the revolution. And so, Kennedy sent in the CIA. The CIA sent in those counter-revolutionaries with American support. The assumption was people would be very passive. They wouldn't care because that's like this Russian author was saying. I'm going to stop sharing this window, but that's what this Russian author was saying. There's a stereotype of Latin Americans tend to be very passive about their government. They don't really care because they don't really feel like they have it, because it's a colonial past too. Because colonized people tend to not feel like they're, shareholders in their government. It's just like, whoever's in power, who cares? It's one dictator or different dictators, the French or the Spanish, who really cares which one of them it is. So they were expecting that with Cuba, but then there was this fierce resistance. And of course, that army they sent was not nearly enough. It was just captured immediately, and it was a huge embarrassment. But with this operation, it went very smoothly. Maduro, there's very confused messaging from what exactly happened, how exactly it's happened, but it did go very smoothly and went very fast. So that's why it's so popular to say, he was probably betrayed by somebody, or, they just decided to sacrifice him to get Trump off their backs. That's a very popular opinion. And I think I wrote actually on Reading Junkie, and that's my other blog, by the way, Reading Junkie, if you navigate there. I wrote that the other day. I watched those videos of the helicopters. And it's like, okay, even if all the stuff the Americans said was true, even if, the electronic warfare, even if the radars were disabled, even if the S-300s were disabled, you can't normally just fly a helicopter, low through an enemy capital. Yeah. That didn't even work in Mogadishu. And Mogadishu, of course, is vastly technologically inferior to Venezuela. But even there, it was just like, it was, Black Hawk Down. It was a battle. Mogadishu was a total disaster. But this time, no one was even shooting at it. There was just no gunfire. There was no man pads. Just no resistance at all. I don't think that necessarily means they told every single Venezuelan soldier, hey, just don't stand down and fight. But I do think that suggests at least some of the leadership either was bribed or collapsed or even collaborated. I think something very seriously wrong happens there. And that just left the guys on the ground with no leadership, and there was no active resistance when they rolled in and took Maduro and his wife.
It's inexplicable how it happened so smoothly. Allegedly, there was like 30-something Cuban security guards that were all killed trying to defend Maduro. It sounds like a Hollywood movie where none of the good guys.
And people have been debating about that too, because they're like, oh, the whole security detail. Oh, here's Bizarny. I'm sure I'm butchering his name. I'm sorry, but I recognize him from Facebook. He's one of our readers here. Good to see him. Good to see you. But people would, and I think the consensus on that too is that those airstrikes came as a surprise. They were not intercepted, and I think they killed people in their barracks or their bases. I think that's probably the large majority of the Cuban casualties, because you're right. It sounds like a Hollywood movie, go and kill 30 guys, like a video game. I don't buy that explanation. I do think the bombs are what killed most of those soldiers. Because there were Venezuelan casualties and there were Cuban casualties, and I think that's the most sensible explanation.
What would have made more sense if that is in fact what happened is for the executive VP after she's sworn in to sound more conciliatory and more like surrendering to the U.S. And so because that would have all made sense. It would have been like, okay, well, they obviously got to the government that was below Maduro. They bought them off or got them, convinced them to stand down through threats or bribes. And then they were able to take out Maduro, and now they're going to, threaten and bribe and use that leverage against the current government to get what they want. Now, that would all make sense. But what kind of throws a wrench in that narrative is the fact that Delcy Rodriguez, the executive VP, who's now the president in Venezuela, is sounding very confrontational, and she's sounding very, adamant that she is not going to just allow, the United States to dictate policies and trade negotiations and, occupy the oil fields and extract all the oil for the benefit of Western corporations, like, Machado, of course, was promising to do if they installed her. And
we don't know, and the problem is we don't know her role in it. And unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish. I don't know a word of Spanish. I'm not, I don't know anything about Venezuela like I do about, far less about Venezuela than I do about Russia. But we don't know if all the pieces, they say the plan went perfectly. Maybe there was more to the plan that didn't fall into place. Maybe they were going to grab her too. Maybe they were going to take out the whole government, but something didn't happen that was supposed to.
Sure. We just don't know, exactly what is going on or what Trump's plan is or how it's going to play out. Now, here, let me throw out one possible, reality here. People say that Trump talks loudly and carries a small stick, right?
Yes.
And that's kind of true. That's kind of what we see with Trump. Like, he's very bellicose, very, loud with his talking, but what he actually does is pretty small as far as militarily. And that's a smart thing, right? Because, he knows better than to get the US bogged down in a big war in Iran or in Venezuela. Like the US, their big strategic interest, their grand chessboard interest is to pivot towards China and start working on, undermining China and weakening China and hurting China. So you can't do that if you get bogged down in a big war in Venezuela, you get bogged down in a big war in Iran. Like, that's going to be in China's best interest. So, I think Trump was wanting to do many things with this regime change, this, kidnapping of Maduro, including making it look like a big win. Shoring up his political base for the upcoming elections, and also just increasing the pressure on Venezuela. But I don't think that what he did could really actually is a regime change, and I don't think so far it's really done anything with a relationship to the natural resources in Venezuela. I mean, they're still controlled by the Bolivarian revolutionary government that Delcy Rodriguez definitely represents. Like, she's a legitimate heir to Chavez, to Maduro. She is, one and the same as those two. And she's, she's not a sellout. And she's got me convinced that, she definitely wasn't, selling out Maduro. I mean, they might have had an agreement that this is what we're going to do. To save, I don't know, maybe there was threats on people's families' lives. Who knows what's going on? But, what has played out has not significantly changed the status quo. I mean, sure, Maduro is in New York, awaiting arraignment in a trial that's going to be presided over by this judge who is 93 years old, and he actually presided over the lawsuits brought by the victims of 9/11 wanting transparency.
What's interesting, I want to interject on that point, because I read about that too, that lawsuit. And which flight? It was one specific flight. It was that one flight. Unfortunately, I forget which flight it was because there were several. Is that particular the family member?
The one that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania?
Maybe it was. Unfortunately, I need to dig up that article. Basically, it was this lawsuit, and he basically strong-armed those families into settling out of court. And the media consent, like even the media consensus at the time when he did that, was this basically saved the U.S. federal government from having to present an explanation of what happened.
Yeah,
because when you go to court, they're supposed to release all those everything that pertains to what happened that day would have been out in the open, but by settling out of court, they don't even need to talk about it. So I don't think that's trivial that they picked him for Maduro, because it's kind of a similar thing. We don't know what Maduro knows. And how long has he been in power? 13 years. So he knows everything Trump won, because it's like, we got Trump, the second version of Trump, who's not quite the same person as the first Trump. We got, he knew Obama, he knew Biden, right? So it's at least 3 different presidents that he potentially has dirt on and he can bring up in court. It's a very I think it's kind of, I mean, and on one hand, it's kind of interesting because a lot of people were bringing up like the Roman triumphs, where they would take a defeated enemy, parade them through Rome in chains. And I think even that's too complimentary a comparison. It's very juvenile to take a captured head of state and treat him like, like a runaway plantation. It's literally how they a slave ran away from your plantation, so you publicly humiliate him to teach the other slaves a lesson. It's such bad optics, and unfortunately that's the tone of the Trump administration, and it's the tone of the Defense Department, which he's gone back to calling the War Department, and Hegseth, who's like the biggest dude bro, like try hard type of guy who wears with the stupid tattoos and the stupid t-shirts and the drinking problem. It's such a thoughtless. The problem with this administration is not even that. Even if you are in full alignment with what Trump, I know not everybody's in full alignment with Trump saying. I'm not in full alignment with what he's saying, but even if I understand his goals, I'm in full agreement with what he does. The issue is that they're so thoughtless about it. I think that's really what, I don't know what Trump knows, right? I wasn't there when they planned this thing, but to me, it was my decision, I would have, after taking Maduro out of the country and bringing him to New York, I would have just said, okay, he's the bad guy. He's the big villain in this story. We freed Venezuela from this evil dictator. We got him now. You're free from him. We're going to lift some sanctions. We're going to normalize relations. He could have been very reconciliatory. So even if, Venezuelan government was mad and wanted to, talk about how back Maduro even when he's captured. It would put them in an awkward position if Trump was just was very reconciliatory and just say, oh, we were ready to build relations with the new liberated Venezuela. I think that would have been a good game plan, because I'd put Venezuela in a very awkward position. It's like, okay, do we, when Trump extends his hands, do we accept it or do we bat it away? So that, but Trump did the opposite, and he basically rubbed it in their faces. Oh, we're controlling. And the thing about, like you said, it's talk big with talk loud with a small stick. He doesn't control Venezuela. There's no boots on the ground. They don't control. And if we want to compare it to Ukraine, it would be like kidnapping Zelensky and then saying, "Oh, we control Ukraine now." It's like, no, you don't. You captured, that one guy. Right. I mean, everybody else who hates Russia and wants to fight Russia is still there. Obviously, go ahead.
Well, let me ask you. So I think President Trump probably has a lot of pressure on him to do things. And there's definitely a pressure on him to do something with Venezuela. Do you think using this small stick and doing what he did, Trump feels kind of, gives some red meat to some people and kind of pacifies some people who were breathing down his neck in a way that is going to be least, that's going to, be the least damaging to him personally, because if he's concerned about, his own political legacy and his own political future, like he's interested in not getting bogged down in a Vietnam style, Venezuelan invasion where there's going to be, coffins coming home. So if he can have a PR victory, grabbing Maduro, no U.S. people died. I mean, it is like Hollywood-esque. Like, it could not have gone better for him. Now, what did it accomplish? Really nothing. But for Trump, it might have accomplished, taking some pressure off of him to do something, just like what he did with Iran. He's got a lot of pressure from the Zionists to invade Iran and regime change it. And so what he did with the 12-day war, he did very little, but it took some pressure off for a while, and he's like bought himself some time. I don't know. That's one way you could look at things.
So it's a good comparison what you made. So I think in particular the part of that war between that feud, I'm not even sure. Well, that feud between Israel and Iran, that Trump. Well, I think the issue was that Israel had been hurt. I don't think they've ever been hurt that bad in their history. And I don't think they were expecting Iran to hurt them that bad, and that's why they really cracked down on anyone trying to share video or photos of the damage. I do think they were very surprised by how bad Iran hurt them. I don't mean they crippled them or they devastated Israel, but they were very surprised by how much damage that Iranian retaliatory strike did. And Trump resolved that in a way that's very shady. And, again, a lot of people suspect that he had arranged this tit for tat, okay, we are going to hit you, we're going to punch you, and then you can punch us back, and that's going to be the end of it. And that's basically what happened, which is very shady, especially because and it was very similar to how the Venezuela is being portrayed. Because remember when they dropped those gravity bombs, which I thought was very strange. They weren't even missiles. They were gravity bombs by these stealth bombers. So you expect me these big old planes flew into the middle of Iran, dropped bombs, flew out, 0 casualties, and they supposedly annihilated. Trump was talking about they annihilated Iran's nuclear program, and then a lot of people afterwards are kind of saying, well, you know what? It's debatable if it damaged it at all. They're not even sure it penetrated the bunkers. What did it hit? We don't really.
And they were given warning. They took out all their fissile material.
Right. So it's one of those. It was a big media spectacle. I think it bailed out. I think more than anyone, besides making Trump look like a big tough guy to his base, it really bailed out Israel, because I think if Israel was in a position where they were humiliated. But we had this big America strong moment, and it saved Israel from being one-upped by this country they've spent so long saying is inferior to them. Now, to compare that with Venezuela, I think is very interesting, because if you look at from an operational risk management or an organizational risk management perspective, right? If you're planning, you're at your job planning something, you're okay, so you have, I've seen some numbers around. So let's say 35 special Delta Force guys, and let's say 50, not even counting the other pilots, because there's supposedly 150 planes involved. Let's say there's 100 people in total, and not to mention it's not just anti-air assets. We have to think about anti-ship missiles. Let's say they shot some missiles at our ships. They saw this attack coming. They didn't just shoot at the planes. They shot at all those ships we have floating around in the Caribbean, right? So there's, it was very, it's just, think of it from the perspective as okay, we have this plan. If it goes perfectly, then we'll have 0 casualties. But if there's one mistake, one single mistake, there's an S-300 that doesn't get taken offline. Just think of all the possible things that could go wrong. If one thing goes wrong, then you have 30 or 50 or 100 dead American soldiers. And, I don't think we've had casualties like that since the second Battle of Fallujah, which was, I think, 2005. 20 years since we've had, I think that'd be political suicide for Trump. If he did without congressional approval, just unilaterally did an operation, and it was like the Iranian hostage crisis, which was a total failure and humiliating for Carter. That could have happened. So, which just makes me cautious to be overly critical of Trump, because I think they knew some things that you and I can't know, right? Because there's clearly some assurances here that wouldn't be another Iranian hostage crisis where the mission completely fails, helicopters are destroyed, people are killed, our people are killed. There's some kind of assurance that wasn't going to happen, that Trump has had and we can't know for sure because we were not in on those conversations. Now, I do think the way things stand right now, this was very good for his base. Like, I go on social media and I see, like, I see some very, the far right, Nick Fuentes type people are critical. But even Nick Fuentes himself wasn't critical. He was praising Trump, which was surprising. It's just so it seems like across the board, the people who matter are supporting him. It's interesting because I see it's very strange to me because I see a lot of media, centrist media and left-leaning media, CNN, the usual suspects, CNN and all these different guys kind of saying like it was this outrageous thing. And like there wasn't a consensus, the majority of Americans are against it. Well, I don't think that's actually true. I think the people who like Trump, because people who hate Trump are against him invading in Venezuela. Well, who cares? It's not like those people are going to vote for Trump to begin with. Their opinion doesn't. I mean, honestly, their opinion doesn't matter. The people whose opinion, what will screw Trump and what will screw MAGA in the midterms is if their supporters stay home. It's like, you know what? Inflation sucks. The job market isn't better. Just, he hasn't fulfilled his immigration promises. It's just he's a big disappointment. I'm not going to bother voting. That will screw them in the midterms because they also are very, riled up Democrats, riled up liberals, riled up leftists, ready to go out and vote. But if he does something very exciting and gets those right-wing and conservative people out voting for him, I think this will benefit him. That's my initial. If he doesn't screw it up, I think this will be very good for him in the midterms this year.
I mean, yeah, his base seems to support what he did, and I mean, I see him out defending, on social media. Why does the left love terrorist drug cartel leaders?
It's actually ironic. It's actually, not to cut you off, it's very ironic because, like, up to this point, they've been very anti-immigration. Oh, who cares? Deport all those brownies, get rid of them, send them back to where they belong, especially Venezuela. Like Venezuela, there's Venezuelan, like every Venezuelan is a drug dealer type of thing. And then I see all these, it's very weird. Like, I feel like I'm in like a parallel universe because I see all these right-wing pages like on Facebook and Twitter are like, oh, well, the Venezuelan people are against like I stand as like
yeah.
It's like
so no, they want to promote the regime change as a good democracy promotion thing, liberating the people, giving them prosperity once again, and eliminating a bad guy. And so that's how Trump is selling it. And then of course a lot of his base is buying it. And so you mentioned that, the liberal media has been a little bit in opposition, right? They haven't really been full supportive.
Like I wouldn't call it hard opposition,
right.
Like Putin being a dictator and invading the poor Ukrainians. It's not that, of course. But soft. Trump shouldn't have done it.
From a partisan perspective. And okay, so this is the main point I wanted to make on today's program, was just to point out how the left, I shouldn't say left, the Democratic, response to this is to say, what Trump did was hypocritical, and now Russia is going to think that they can do the same thing to Ukraine, and China is going to think they can do the same thing to Taiwan. So this is a liberal criticism of Trump's, of Trump's regime change, of his kidnapping of Maduro, and their basic criticism is, it's not international law. It goes against international law, and now it's going to liberate, Russia and China to do the same thing. But I just want to push back on that entire thinking. First of all, when I talk about liberalism, it's big L liberalism. And again, there's all kinds of liberals. There's conservative liberals, there's liberal liberals, there's democratic liberals, there's Republican liberals, there's pro-war liberals, there's pro-imperialist liberals, there's anti-imperialist liberals who pretend to be anti-imperialist. But what they all have in common is that they're confused and they don't understand the reality of oppositional class interests and how the class dynamics really are the driving factors of geopolitics. But So why is it stupid to pretend that, what Trump did in Venezuela would be no different than if China did that to Taiwan, or if Russia, Russia's doing that in Ukraine? It's dumb because it's totally different. Like, it's not an apples and apples comparison. What the United States would like to do in Venezuela is to overthrow the government, put in a puppet regime that will help the United States extract and control that oil, and for a number of geopolitical reasons. Number one, to keep China from taking it, from having access to it, but also, for the Western corporations to profit from it. And probably in a future war with Iran, if all of the Middle East oil exports, come to a stop, being able to open up the Venezuelan spigot will help stabilize the global energy market and keep Wall Street happy. So there's a lot of geopolitical reasons why the United States wants to control Venezuelan oil, and that is not anything near what China's claim to Taiwan is, or Russia's grievance against Ukraine. Like, these are totally different things. And so, and in each one, the U.S. is the one that is to blame, because it's the U.S. that tried to weaponize Ukraine against Russia in the hopes of regime change in Russia, balkanizing Russia, and turning it into 5 or 6 little statelets that can then be dominated by the United States. So it's the United States doing things in Ukraine that has resulted in Putin's necessary action, his necessary military action. So again, liberals just don't have a clue. And when they, just mindlessly assert that what Trump did in Venezuela is going to, green light and allow China to do, quote unquote, the same thing, I just push back on that same thing, because it's not the same thing, because Taiwan is China. Taiwan is part of China. And if China feels it's necessary to demonstrate that fact with a military operation, that is totally different than invading another sovereign country to take their fucking oil. Like, that is not the same thing, you stupid liberals.
Well, yeah, and I want to emphasize that in general, if you're, it's a normal person, you're not a political pundit or anybody in particular. You're just an average person who's living your life, going to your job, raising your family. And you see in the news that these two faraway countries, bordering countries that you don't know much about, you just know there's these two countries that border each other, and they have a war. Well, your first thought should be, well, okay, when there are two countries that share a border and have these intermixing of people and culture and affairs, you can understand that, there's things that can go wrong. There can be legitimate reasons that both sides are upset with each other enough to have a war over it, right? But I mean, that's common sense, right? That's common sense. Like, even when there's a dispute, like two kids at school get into a fight, you're like, okay, there's the kid who started it, but you can kind of understand that blame can be shared, right? It's very rare when you get into a fight that was all just one person. I mean, sometimes it is, but it's usually not just one person aggressing.
So you're giving credence to conventional liberal wisdom.
Well, let me finish though. So you're like, okay, so you can say, okay, this kid at school, these two kids get into a fight. You're like, okay, you say, okay, you can even say this kid is 40% responsible, and this kid was a little bit more aggressive, so he gets 60% of the blame. And I think that applies to most wars. I think it's common sense to be like, well, I don't know what's going on here. I'm not going to immediately assume one side's the good guy and one side's the bad guy. But the problem is that the media, that's how we present it. It's like, oh, this side, we said this side is the bad guy and this side is the good guy because we told you so. So this evil bad guy who wants to throw babies out of incubators, right? And I didn't realize this until I was an adult. But even Saddam Hussein, who's like probably one of the most demonized, like almost as demonized as Hitler, if you really think about it. He's just not as powerful as Hitler, but he's demonized almost as much as Hitler. If you look at what caused that dispute between Iraq and Kuwait, well, in the Cold War, the USA was undermining OPEC by Kuwait creating a glut because the Soviet Union in the 1970s was really investing in their oil, exploiting their oil reserves. But Russia's oil is heavier oil. It's harder to get to. It will never be as cheap as what the Middle East can produce. So what the USA was doing was telling Kuwait, hey, just pump as much oil as you want, keep those prices down. That hurts the Soviet Union. Well, the problem was that it also hurts the other OPEC members. Saddam was getting incredibly pissed about that. It's like, because OPEC has quotas. When you join OPEC, you have a quota. You're not supposed to go over the quota. And Kuwait was just habitually going over the quota. He was upset about it. Then there was this allegation that Kuwait was actually stealing Iraqi oil, neighboring. Yeah. So if you look at the detail, you can okay, I can see why, you have these two Arab states that are basically family matters. I mean, it's not even being racist. It's just, it's this one family who control. I mean, it is how it is. The Husseins controlled Iraq. It's just whatever family can. And they had this dispute, and they're like, okay, I'm going to send my troops. I'm going to teach them a lesson. But then when he did that, the USA made it sound like he was the next Hitler, the next Holocaust. He's throwing babies out of incubators and caused this huge moral panic. And the problem with moral panic is that moral panics kill people, right? Because if the USA had done nothing, they did kill some people. There were some bad things that happened in the Iraqi invasion. But what the USA did was worse. They killed, thousands and thousands of people, not even just the Iraqi soldier, on the highway of death. They killed everybody on that highway. That included fleeing civilians, third country. No one talks about the third because of Kuwait. If you've ever been to Kuwait, they hire a lot of Filipinos and these third country, people who just want a job.
Yeah.
They obviously didn't want to sit in a war zone, so they were trying to escape too. And the USA Air Force just killed everybody on that road. Well, you can't. Well, because if you take the hysteria and the propaganda out, it's like, well, the cure was worse than the disease. The USA intervention killed way more people than if you just approached Saddam diplomatically. And if you really dig into it, you realize, well, okay, Bush told Saddam, leave Kuwait. Saddam was actually leaving. He actually did it. He was actually leaving Kuwait. And while his troops were retreating, like Bush had told them to, they bombed the hell out of them. And because the USA wanted an easy victory that they could show as defeat. And I think that one of the big reasons they did the Gulf War is they wanted someone who had, because Saddam at that point had a lot of older Soviet equipment. They wanted to show, look how superior America. So you want that really one-sided fight where, we have one side using Russian equipment, the other side using, superior American equipment, and say, look how. So there's a lot of reasons they did it. It was I think in shaping American policy, shaping the world, the first Gulf War was very important for that. And we see something similar now. They're already running all these stories. And it's funny how little, the only information we really have are some photos, some statements from Venezuela, we don't have a lot of information of what happened in Venezuela, but they're already spitting it as this huge, we humiliated China. You can kind of see them probing who can we humiliate more. I mean, they mentioned some stuff about Russia, but I think because it was China that invested so much more. It was really China that was the whale behind Venezuela's military commander. Look how humiliated China is by this. And I think it's very similar to what happened in the Gulf War, because it's really, they want this spectacle. They really want a way they can spin it, even if it's not what happens. They want a way they can spin it is this parable of American superiority.
And yeah, there was definitely.
I was on my soapbox. I apologize.
There was a convergence of factors, that led to that operation, and I definitely, it just seems like there had to have been assurances that, don't worry, everything will go perfectly. because it's hard to imagine Trump risking things if he didn't have assurances. And then the question is, who was giving those assurances, and how, and was Maduro involved? Did they sacrifice Maduro behind his back? I mean, these are all very good questions. And, it seems impossible that, the actual government that's in power now wouldn't have been part of the negotiations with Trump, to make sure Trump knew there would be no risk involved, because it seems like, beforehand, Trump knew that there was going to be very little risk involved with this. But who knows? I mean, maybe, it was all just American military prowess, and, they had been there for months and they knew where every single anti-aircraft battery was, and they just took them out. They were able to jam all the communications. Like, it's just like, who knows? But the question is, moving forward, what is the benefit to this? And yeah, so definitely political benefit, short-term political benefit. It might rally the base. It might bring them out for the midterms. He might be able to, sell this as, a great victory for freedom in America. And, is he going to play up the idea that, having that oil is going to help the American, citizen who's been dealing with austerity and inflation and all that? I mean, of course, if you listen to Delcy Rodriguez, no, it's not going to, what happened with Maduro is not going to change anything. It's interesting that we see, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of reports of Russia, Venezuela, China flooding Venezuelan ports with their tankers and filling up and leaving. Like, there's just been a huge glut of tankers going to Venezuela to fill up on Venezuelan oil after Maduro left, which is an interesting thing. And, the headlines I've seen is like, Russia and China are defying the U.S. blockade, the U.S. oil blockade of Venezuela. And they're doing it and they're not being harassed or attacked. But what I think is going on, and as always, we have to have the big macro analysis, which is, there's this rising power, China, and the U.S. is trying to set the battlefield. They're trying to, set up the stage to best, benefit themselves when they have a future escalation with China. And definitely controlling, limited regime change in Iran, keeping Iran from selling oil to China, regime changing Venezuela, keeping Venezuela from selling oil to China. These are things that geostrategically the United States is very interested in doing, because, in the future, they really do want to implement an embargo against China in order to, weaken China's economy and really try and keep them from, being an economic and political rival on the global stage. It's about global hegemony, maintaining the U.S., current level of global hegemony. So, it really, so there's a lot of factors, right? There's domestic political considerations. There's the big geopolitical chessboard. There's a reason why we want to go after it. We haven't seen anything actually materialize in terms of policy or in terms of politicians in Venezuela saying, hey, we're on the side of the United States, so really, if the idea is we're going to make sure Venezuela can't sell their oil to China, and we're going to profit from it and extract it, and it's going to benefit American corporations, like, that hasn't happened yet. All that's happened is Maduro is now in New York. I mean, that's it. And so we have to wait and see what the point of it was, if anything, with regards to the big geopolitical calculation. And well,
Yes.
go ahead. I've talked for a while.
Yes. No. I think that you need to hit the nail on the head.
Well, I was going to say Iran also. Like, if the United States can control Venezuelan oil, that would really, the deterrence, right? So Iran has a deterrence, and the United States does not want to attack Iran because Iran has the capability to eliminate energy exports from the Middle East. They have all these missiles. They can make sure that Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar are not able to export their oil if the United States really tries for regime change in Iran. And this is a deterrent. And if the United States controls Venezuela's oil, it's less of a deterrent because they could turn up the volume of exports from Venezuela to help stabilize the global oil market during a month-long or a 2-month-long or a 3-month-long regime change operation against Iran. So, Iran has been able to effectively deter the United States from doing that so far. But if the United States controls Venezuela's oil, that deterrent is less of a factor because, again, Venezuela, their huge oil supplies could, help to stabilize the oil markets and keep Wall Street from panicking in the event of a big, obstruction of Mideast oil. Anyway, those are my primary thoughts. What do we have? We have some comments.
Well, I don't know because, yeah. So Patrick's is Patrick who's commenting on YouTube. He doesn't really think Trump really wants to invest billions to extract Venezuelan oil. I mean, the whole narrative that conservatives, and I don't know if I'd even call them conservatives, it's neocons. It's like we're back to Bush era politics. The whole narrative is that the Venezuelan communists, evil, bad commies, stole American infrastructure when they nationalized oil.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know. It's difficult to say. I think what you said is true. I think Trump needs to follow up because because when are what month of November, right? The midterm elections, are they November again, or are they earlier?
It sounds about right. The midterms
right.
is typically
so we got
in
some
November.
time. I think I was thinking about this today. I think he needs to follow. I think this is a strong note for Trump. His base is very energized. They love it. They're make America great again. It's making America, the strong empire it used to be. It's very much MAGA. It's MAGA. But I think he needs to follow through. He can't. It's not just he did this one thing and said, oh, I liberated Venezuela. That's the reason you should vote for MAGA candidates. I don't think that's
right
enough. I think and I see the Danes and like Europeans like even in my friends list, like they're so scared right now, which I can't sympathize with them because it's so self-inflicted. I was even telling one of them today, I was like, well, did you not see this company? Did you think you would never be on the menu? It would always be someone else.
You're talking about making Greenland great again?
Right. They're so spooked about, and, people ask me, do you think, like in Russians will ask me, do you think Trump's going to annex Greenland? And I say, and I tell them, I don't know if Trump is going to, but he could. So I don't know if he will, but he could if he just decided, because who's going to do anything about it? If Trump just said, we're going to take Greenland, we're going to make Greenland great again, who's going to stop him? No one can stop him.
I was reading some Telegram on that topic this morning, and it sounds like so the Kingdom of Denmark, technically, Greenland is a current colony of the Kingdom of Denmark. And what Trump is doing, he's negotiating with the actual leaders in Greenland, and he's trying to get them to, side with the U.S. and come to an agreement with the United States, and kind of just what is the, separate from the Kingdom of Denmark, secede basically to secede as a colony, and to have this defense arrangement, security arrangement with the United States, which will then invest in their, they're trying to sell it, right? They're using bribery, saying we're going to help develop Greenland. We're going to uplift people's quality of lives. You're going to give us security domination, over the island, I guess. And you guys can stay in power, but it'll be, you'll have an agreement with us instead of anyway. So, they're hoping to do that. I think that would be, Trump would prefer that to any kind of, actual military coup d'etat in Greenland that is not going to sell well in Europe. It's going to piss people off. And it's just, it'll be so much easier just to get the current government there to agree. So that's what they're working on, and we'll see how that plays out. Friend of the show, it's also worth remembering that Venezuela has repeatedly stated its willingness to compensate U.S. investments. Oh, yeah. These are good points.
So why don't you read it for people who are just listening and not looking at the screen?
Read the whole thing. Okay, yeah, let me read the whole thing. So it's also worth remembering. So this is Christine Lynn has a comment. It is also worth remembering that Venezuela has repeatedly stated its willingness to compensate U.S. investments, both historically and more recently, but on sovereign legal terms. Those offers were rejected, not because compensation was absent, but because Venezuela refused to surrender valuation and jurisdiction to external authorities. So this just speaks to the the narrative, right? Trump's narrative that, Venezuela stole our oil, right? Like, it's preposterous. And in reality, the Venezuela nationalized their oil in the 70s. And why was Maduro and Chavismo popular in Venezuela? It was popular because even though they nationalized their oil in the 70s, the 80s and 90s saw a de facto privatization. Even though it didn't happen, the 80s and 90s in Venezuela saw private corporations dominating the oil, extracting all the wealth, and the people weren't getting anything. And the people were living in real bad poverty. And this is what led to Chavez being a popular government, because he said that outright, and he said that we need to renegotiate these terms. We need to put real nationalization, not this fake nationalization, make that the policy. And so he actually was in prison because he tried a military coup in the 90s, and he was put in prison. And then later, he used the democratic process to take power. But again, he was only able to do that because the nationalization that occurred in the 70s was a fake nationalization, or maybe it wasn't then, but it turned into a fake nationalization, especially in the 90s. And the level of poverty and the level of exploitation that was going on with regards to Venezuelan oil was just incredible. And the people really hated it, and it was obvious. And they knew what was going on. And that's why they've won elections ever since, which is another lie that, Maduro lost the election, he rigged it. No, that's not true. The vast, vast majority of Venezuelans are poor, and they understand that they are represented by the government of Chavez and Maduro.
Well, what you said is interesting. Just to interject.
Yeah.
Because the whole narrative, and it's interesting because I have this argument with the same people sometimes on social media, like when Machado, am I saying her name correctly? Machado.
Yeah.
Won the Nobel Peace Prize. She came out of nowhere. Like, I was like, oh, look at this opposition candidate, and like all these people were just shilling for her. Like, oh my gosh, she's beloved by the Venezuelan people. They all love her. 99% of Venezuelans love her. But the election, Maduro rigged the election. She had to go into hiding. This whole sad story. And now Trump, when I first saw it, I thought it was fake news. Like, I literally thought it was just, they're exaggerating. Trump didn't actually say that, but I looked it up, and he did actually say that. People ask him, well, is she going to be the next president of Venezuela? And it was Trump. We said, well, Machado doesn't have support of the people. He literally, word for word. Well, that's word for word. That's why I thought it was it was fake news. He couldn't have said that, but he did actually say that. It's like, she doesn't have the support of the people. It's like, I thought she was like the legitimate winner of the election. Now you're telling me she doesn't have even there's the exact.
But you notice that he didn't feel comfortable saying that until after his big military operation. And it's like, only Nixon could go to China and end that embargo. And only Trump could say that after he goes and, kidnaps Maduro. Then he feels comfortable saying it. It's like he's playing this middle ground, he's tacking back and forth, but he doesn't want to, throw himself all into one side. He's like, he's just navigating. He's using his political instincts to navigate, his presidency. And it's really interesting. But I was surprised as hell. I just assumed, Machado was the heir apparent that they were going to try and force in there, and then, use her to get everything they want with Venezuela, like she promised to do. I mean, she literally promised, please invade Venezuela. I will give you all the oil. Please take it. It'll be awesome. And so no, I thought that was the plan.
Not even the anti-Maduro expats seem to like her, because I see several Venezuelan
she's not
expats
likable.
who are very anti-Maduro, like, oh, Maduro is like just the most worst, evil, bad person in the world. But I don't see a single one of those people saying, oh, I love Maria. I love Machado. She's just such I have never, since she appeared, it was so artificial. It's so artificial because I've never seen anybody, not even an expat, say he likes her. Nobody.
The only people that could like her, are the Western oil corporations that, appreciate her promises. But yeah, no, she just seems so unlikable, and no self-respecting Venezuelan is going to be, happy with a politician that pleads for another government to bomb them. So, yeah, and then the idea that her party actually won the election, Trump is kind of, proving that narrative to be false as well by acknowledging that, yeah, nobody supports her. So then we were talking before the show, Ian, about the current swearing in. So, the Venezuela has a constitution. The constitution says that if something's going to happen to the president, the next heir to the presidency is of course the executive vice president. So that's Delcy Rodriguez. We talked a little bit about her before the program. So, but we were mentioning that her father was essentially killed in police custody, probably in the late 80s or early 90s, I'm guessing, when it was Corina Machado's government that was in power. So there is definitely, a political divide in, Venezuela. And of course, it falls upon class lines, right? So you've got, the representatives of the masses of the Venezuelan people, and then you have the government that represents the wealthy elites, who are happy to not invest any of the oil resources in the poor people, right? They want it for themselves, and they're happy to share the bulk of it with the West. That's how imperialism works. That's how, neocolonialism works, where you put in power a puppet class of people who are happy to facilitate the exploitation and the extraction of wealth for the benefit of a foreign power. And Machado definitely represents that class and that government, and it was in power. It was in power in the 80s and 90s. And Delcy Rodriguez, her father, was a revolutionary who opposed that, wanted to put in a government of, for, and by the people. And, he was arrested and then killed in police custody. So that's an important aspect. And that's why I say that, Delcy Rodriguez is a legit, heir to the Bolivarian Revolution. And I'm glad that she's in power. And I appreciate the things that she's saying and the stance and the position that she's taking with regards to this, this Trump kidnapping of Maduro. And so, again, it remains to be seen what Trump hopes to accomplish. I think he definitely did relieve some pressure. If there was a pressure building up on him to do something, he used his little stick. He did something big, aesthetically big, right? Like to the eye, it's big, but in reality, it's nothing. Nothing's changed. And so we just got to see how that's going to play out.
I want to address what Patrick, if Patrick is still with us and still listening, we said a little bit earlier. And Patrick's comments earlier was, it's almost like Trump is embracing multipolarity to some degree, ceding influence across the pond to build up more regional power. And it's the Democrats who almost seem more hell-bent on unipolarity. I think that's true to an extent. So both publicly available and private, information sources that I have seen since even before Trump took office, even when his administration, even before he swore in, those people were building his policy in the State Department and the Department of Defense at the time. I don't remember the exact quote verbatim, but basically their exact mission statement was to stop placating this collective interest, this collective identity, because Democrats, like Patrick was saying, really embrace this collective identity, like with Europe. It's this new word. This rules based, like Liz Truss and Boris Johnson says, this
Shared values.
Shared values, rules based world order. It's this giant, it's this hegemonic entity of multiple countries all working together. The Trump America First policy mission statement contradicted that. They said no more collective identity, working in the interests of some, external, collective.
Yeah.
Just America First was good for the USA. So I think they've not exactly adhered to that because they like Israel a little too much, but it's a separate topic of discussion. But in the context of Venezuela and Greenland, it makes sense. It's like, we don't care about NATO. We don't care about Europe. Screw those guys. What's good for the USA? What's good for American hegemony? So I sort of agree with Patrick, but at the same time, I don't. They would like to hold on to the whole world if they can.
Yeah.
It's just, it might seem different from what the Democrats are doing because Democrats are so invested. I think it's really because Europeans really kiss the boots of Democrats. Like Obama. When did Obama leave office? 2016, right?
Yes.
2016. He's been out of power for 9 years, more than 9 years. And he still goes to Europe, and they just treat him like he's just the emperor. He's just he's just the king of the universe. So you can understand why Democrats are so invested in what Europeans want, because Europeans just really shine their shoes. They're so committed to serving Democrats.
You could see from the very beginning of the Trump administration that he was opposed to the transatlantic alliance, and he was really, had an approach towards Europe that was very, hostile, right? And everybody accused Trump of, being mean to our friends and being nice to our enemies was the big thing. Especially talking about Russia. Russia's supposed to be our enemy. Why is he being nice to Putin? Europe's our ally. Why is he being so mean to Europe? But I think that this has been part of a greater, geopolitical strategy, to do a couple things. I mean, it's really to identify the biggest threat to the liberal world order and the oligarchy. I just call it the oligarchy, the Western oligarchy. The biggest global threat to the Western oligarchy is China and Russia, and Iran to a lesser extent. But really, China and their ballooning economy is the big threat for displacing Western imperialism. And so they've decided upon a couple things. You got to really understand these terms, right? So division of labor. And by the way, Brian Berletic, he talks about this all the time. He's really insightful. So division of labor and strategic sequencing, so if the United States is going to pivot to China and get serious about containing China and hurting China's economy, they can't do everything. And so we have to kind of hand Europe and Russia off to Europe. So we kind of have to detach ourselves from that if we're really going to focus on, because we're a finite empire. Like, we don't have unlimited resources. We don't have unlimited manpower. So in order to, really address these challenges facing Western oligarchy, there has to be a division of labor. So division of labor.
I might have agreed with you 6 months ago.
Okay.
But before I give my rebuttal, I want to answer Ramisha.
Sure.
Ramisha, I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong, but Ramisha is a great supporter of the channel. I've talked to her on Facebook before. She's she's one of our most dedicated viewers here. And she said, I want to point out the timing. And she wonders if when the Epstein files were
Yeah.
declassified, and that's when Trump attacked Venezuela. So I've heard that theory, as I think that's a good question. I think it's, I mean, I've heard it before. I don't think there's as much weight to it. I don't think there's as much weight to the Epstein. I know a lot of people don't hear that, but I don't think there's as much weight to the Epstein files as they think there is. I don't think Trump is personally implicated in the Epstein files. And the reason I say this is because he made it such a central point in his campaign. Like, why would you constantly talk about the Epstein files if you were incriminated by the Epstein files? It doesn't make any sense. I think what happened was Trump came back into the presidency, and he was just told, look, there's too many skeletons in that closet. Everybody's implicated. If the Epstein files came out, like, it would bring down the United States government. Like 2/3 of Congress would go to prison. It would just be a disaster. We are not under any circumstances going to release those.
Yeah.
I also think it's very likely that Israel, because Epstein was, was basically a known IDF, Mossad. Yeah. So I think they just told him, look, dude, it's not going to happen. We're not going to release
Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of the chief of Mossad. Like her dad was the chief of Mossad for many years, and I mean that was his co-conspirator. So for sure, it's not undeniable links to Israel. And
yes, I think it's just, I think even if Trump was planning to, I think when you're, because we also have to remember that Trump was not in power. He was a former president. He's basically a private citizen. He was not being given classified information when he was after he left office the first time. And then I think they just told him, look, dude, it's not going to happen. And he didn't have a choice. He wasn't personally implicated, but he didn't have a choice because both Republicans and Democrats are so heavily implicated, they can't. And so I don't think Venezuela, I just want to finish that. I don't think Venezuela had anything to do with that. I think we look for patterns. I think it's the human instinct to look for patterns, and sometimes those patterns are true. I think sometimes also coincidence. So I think when you look at the pattern of Venezuela in hindsight, it makes sense. So it's like, okay, I can see the buildup leading up to that strike, and the day it happened. Okay, look, okay, I can see how that's happened. I don't think it's directly related to the Epstein files, but it does strengthen Trump's position because he was not doing so good. The economy's not been doing so good. The stock market's not been going so good. A lot of people are asking questions about silver and gold. Why are those prices going through the roof? Why is the dollar shit? Because I know this as an American who lives in Russia, who gets paid in dollars because I get a military pension. So I get paid. I don't get paid in rubles. Like Putin doesn't pay me. I know people on Facebook all think Putin pays me. I'm best friends with Putin. But I get paid in dollars. The U.S. government gives me my pension every month in dollars. And my pension is worth probably 25 to 30% less than it did a year ago. Is that extreme? Right, yeah. So is that
I had no idea. That's a lot.
Yeah, so it's so I think it came to the point where Trump needed to do something, because if I was a Republican still living in the USA and still voting, because I didn't vote in the last election, I could have gone to the embassy and voted for Trump or Biden or Harris or whoever. I didn't care enough. But if I was a Republican conservative living in the USA who wanted America first, who wanted, deportations and all this other crap that Trump talks about, I wouldn't be excited. I'd be like, well, he's been very disappointing. But Venezuela changed that. They're like, oh, he's this cool, badass war president. Everybody's just like so excited by it. I think this is going to be big. I think if he follows up with Greenland or I don't know.
Cuba,
I think,
Nicaragua.
If he's careful, he picks low-hanging fruit and he follows this up a couple of times. I think 2026 is going to be a very good year for him. That's what I think. I don't
So
know if you
you
disagree with
think it is
that.
a pretty big PR victory.
I think it's a huge PR victory. And I know if you just look at the news, and I was telling you this earlier in the show, if you just look at the news, they're just like, they're demonizing Trump and they're like, oh, it's super unpopular. Everybody stands with Venezuela. I think those people are full of shit saying that. I think there's wish fulfillment. I think there's confirmation bias.
Yeah.
I understand if you're a leftist or a liberal and you already don't like Trump,
right.
You can, but you really have to try to imagine yourself in the other person's shoes. Imagine if you were a conservative. Imagine if you were a Republican or a MAGA person who wears the Trump hat. Really try to bend your imagination enough to imagine yourself as that person. Trump just did something really cool, and those people are really excited right now. They're extremely excited. I think they're abandoning their reason a little bit. Like they're kind of contradicting themselves. Well, okay, I thought you didn't like Venezuelans. I thought you wanted to deport them all. Now you're saying we're freeing. They're talking about the Venezuela. Well, I talked to Venezuelans in Miami, and they all love, that Trump arrested Maduro. Well, I thought those guys were all drug dealers, and you hated those guys. You wanted to deport them back to Venezuela. Well. The point is, Trump really excited those people. It was a huge PR victory.
Yeah, and so we'll have to wait to see if it's any other kind of victory, right? It's still unclear. It seems that as far as victories go, the only kind of victory it is a PR victory. As far as material relations with the resources of Venezuela. Because nothing really seems to have changed yet. And again, it's the same government in power. And, despite claims to the contrary, Maduro wasn't a dictator. He was the head, he had a position in a government, and that position has been filled by somebody else. So it's, it remains to be seen.
Latino Hitler. What are you talking about? He was like Hitler with more dance moves, with a better
salsa Hitler. He was like salsa Hitler.
Salsa Hitler.
So Ian, what else? We've been going a good hour and 15 minutes. I think we've done a good job on this particular topic. Before all the sugar runs out of my blood, is there anything else we want to
Yes. So our viewers. So at the beginning of the show, we were bringing up my Substack, and we were talking about how Billy Bob and I are terrible at marketing ourselves. Like we'll talk about other people. We'll never market our own websites or our own products. But I want to bring up that I started an Amazon affiliation. So if you go on Substack, my Substack, or if you go on readingjunkie.com, there is an Amazon web banner. And if you buy your next, you do your next Amazon shopping spree on just click through that web banner, buy, just go to the normal Amazon store. It will give me a cut of what you spent there, which is good for the website because the website's not free to run. And it's good because my New Year's resolution for this year was to really focus on the journalism, really focus on the Russian news reports, focus on this podcast more. So it's good to, we've already had several readers jump in and start doing their Amazon shopping through me. So if you do that actually does help a lot. So that's my
every viewer has to decide if you want Bezos to get all the profit from your Amazon shopping, or if you want Bezos to share some with Ian. You can just go to Amazon through that link, and then anything you buy, Bezos will not get 100% of the profit. So no, that's a great thing, and I hope probably the U.S. dollar goes a lot farther in Moscow than it does in California, where I am. I mean, we're, our cost is pretty high. So every little bit, I'm sure, helps. But I encourage people to do that. And it's, I shop on Amazon constantly. And so, I mean,
so you need to practice what you preach also.
No, exactly. I do. And I will. Anything else, Ian?
No, I think if unless our viewers, our dedicated viewers, have any remaining questions, we'll give them a few seconds. We got Ramisha, we got Christine. I haven't seen any new comments from. I just don't want to cut them out. I know your blood sugar is on the clock,
Yeah.
but
Well, how is Spaz? I haven't heard from Spaz
well,
today.
so Spaz is, for those of you who don't know, Spaz is he's a Beagle and Jack Russell Terrier mix. He's very energetic. And I got him when I was in America, when I was living in Iowa. I actually got him there when he was a puppy. So I have spent his entire life. We've spent his entire life together. He is 8 years old. When I moved to Russia, I left him with some friends, and then I came back for him. I went through all this paperwork and all this bureaucracy to put him on the plane and take him to Russia. So he lives here with me. And I have him locked in the other room just so we wouldn't be distracted. In fact, Spaz. Everybody can meet the real start of the show. This is our guy.
And where is Spaz's partner?
Oh, the cats. So we
Yeah.
have the Russian cat, Pusha. I don't know where he is.
Okay.
Right now. He is probably
Well, yeah,
sleeping
no,
in
they are the
corner
highlights.
somewhere.
That's really why everyone tunes in. Patrick, you mentioned the ACP. So no, I thank you for mentioning ACP. I am, I hope to have some ACP representatives on maybe next week. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I do appreciate their party program. And so, thanks for bringing that up. And like I said, I think Tuesday, I'm hoping to invite a couple representatives on to discuss current events and also what the party's doing in the United States. But with that, let us adjourn, and then maybe we'll reconvene on Friday, but we might just wait until Tuesday. Me and Ian will talk about that. Okay, Ian?
All right, sounds good. Sounds like a plan. I'm sorry, meeting on Friday. Are we doing a meeting on Friday, or was that with the Christine show?
No, so Christine, okay, yeah, me and Christine do every other Friday. So this is our off Friday. So we can convene a show if we want. We're going to discuss that post show. And then if not Friday, we'll reconvene Tuesday. But we might reconvene Friday if we want to. So with that, everyone, thank you so much. And we will see you later.